Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Welcome to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class, which is from Canto 1, Chapter 19, Text 31. And we are fortunate to have His Grace Dronacharya Das, ISKCON Philadelphia, to give a class this morning. And let me be quick to apologize. I know what situation he goes through on Monday morning trying to get his son to school and going to Philadelphia rush hour traffic to come back to give this class. So sometimes that happens, and we can understand. But at the same time, please have humble basis. First, to good issue, Prabhupada. Jai.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Good morning, Harrisburg family. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. It's great to be with everybody today. I feel very fortunate to be in your association. And thank you, Parikshit, for saying that. It's always kind of tough. Uh, I always feel really bad about it. It just doesn't seem to work out. But
I would like to hear you preach, though.
Jai. Tell me, Prabhu, should I do Jai Radha Madhava or get right into the verse?
I would say that I'm out about maybe a short one.
Okay. Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Shodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Shodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribrajikacharya Ashottatara Shishimad is Divine Grace Shila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribrajikacharya Ashottatara Shishimad is Divine Grace Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Maharaj ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Namacharya Shila Haridas Thakur ki Jai Prem Skaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakund Giri Govardhan ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham ki Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki Jai Ganga Mai ki Jai Jamuna Mai ki Jai Bhakti Devi ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai Brihat Mridanga ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai Nitai Gora Premanande Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories, all glories, all glories to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru, Shri Gauranga. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Tirtha Swamini Namane Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Shraddhatmane Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhakti Tirtha Iti Namane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayit Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtuki. For reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, one should offer one's most respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human beings, unto the Goddess of Learning, Mother Saraswati, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance in classes in Srimad Bhagavatam, and rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart becomes almost completely destroyed, and devotional service becomes established within one's heart as an irrevocable fact. So we are continuing our study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 19, text number 31. Prasantamash asinam akunta medasham munim nipo bhagavato biyupetya pranamya murdana vidhita kritanjaler Natva gire sunrityan an vapachrichat Prashantam asnam akunta medasham munim nripo bhagavato vipyutya pranamya murdana vahita kritanjalir Natva gira sunratya nan vaparjat prasantamasnam akunta medasham munim nripo bhagavato biyupetya pranamya murdana vahita kritanjaler Natva gira sunrit yan vaparichat. Would any devotees online like to chant?
Prashantamasinamakuntamedasam munim ripo bhagavato abhyupetya pranmaya murthavani hitaha kritanjali natva gira sunratayan vaprachat.
Prasantamasina makutam kuntamedasam munim nipo bhagavato vyupetya pranamya mudna vahita kritanjali natvajira sunvitaya yanva prichat. Hare Krishna.
Prashantamasina makuntamedasam munim nripo bhagavato abhyupetya pranamya murdan vahita kritanjali natva gira sunritayan vaprichat. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prashantam asinam akuntamedasam muninam nrupo bhagavato abhipete pranamya murdna vahitat prutanjali natva gira srunatayan pruchata. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so we'll go to the synonyms. Prashantam, perfectly pacified. Asinam, sitting. Akunta, without hesitation. Medasham, one who has sufficient intelligence. Munim, unto the great sage. Nripa, the king, Maharaj Parikshit. Bhagavata, the great devotee. Upetya, approaching him. Pranamya, bowing down. Murdina, his head. Avitaha, properly. Kritva Anjali, with folded hands. Natva, politely. Gira, by words. Sunhritaya, in sweet voices. Anvaprichat, inquired. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The sage Sri Sukadev Goswami sat perfectly pacified, intelligent, and ready to answer any questions without hesitation. The great devotee, Maharaj Parikshit, approached him, offered his respects by bowing before him, and politely inquired with sweet words and folded hands. Purport. The gesture now adopted by Maharaj Parikshit of questioning a master is quite befitting in terms of scriptural injunctions. The scriptural injunction is that one should humbly approach a spiritual master to understand the transcendental science. Maharaj Parikshit was now prepared for meeting his death, and within a very short time of 7 days, he was to know the process of entering the kingdom of God. In such important cases, one is required to approach a spiritual master. There is no necessity of approaching a spiritual master unless one is in need of solving the problems of life. One who does not know how to put questions before the spiritual master has no business seeing him. And the qualification of the spiritual master is perfectly manifested in the person Sukadev Goswami. Both the spiritual master and the disciple, namely Sri Sukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, attained perfection through the medium of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sukadev Goswami learned Srimad Bhagavatam from his father, Vyasadeva, but he had no chance to recite it. Before Maharaj Parikshit, he recited Srimad Bhagavatam and answered the questions of Maharaj Parikshit unhesitatingly. And thus both the master and disciple got salvation. Om Agyanatimarandasha Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umaletam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Swapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The verse once again. The sage Sri Sukadev Goswami sat perfectly pacified, intelligent, and ready to answer any questions without hesitation. The great devotee Maharaj Parikshit approached him, offered his respects by bowing before him, and politely inquired with sweet words and folded hands.
Hare Krishna. Should I leave you on or stop sharing? What do you want?
You can stop sharing. It's up to you. Whatever you want. However you usually do it. This is a very beautiful verse about the relationship between the guru and disciple. Then it's very important for us to understand this relationship. Maharaj Parikshit, he was in a time period of his life, towards the end of his life, where everything was very serious. Only 7 days, and we've been reading about this. And he did the right thing in approaching a self-realized soul in Sukadev Goswami to understand, he says, to understand the transcendental science of life. This process of inquiring with submission, we see throughout our scriptures. In fact, this idea of asking questions is what the premise of the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam are based on. They're books of questions and answers. Arjuna, Krishna he's giving Arjuna some instructions, but really he's answering Arjuna's questions. That's why it makes it so relevant, is because when we look at it, we think, wow, these are good questions, and I can learn a lot from these questions. Srimad Bhagavatam, we find the same thing. First it's the question from Maharaj Parikshit to Shukadev Goswami, but then we find through the different leelas and pastimes and circumstances that are presented throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, other wonderful devotees who are going through troubles and tribulations, their stories are being told. And throughout that, there are different questions and then answers to those questions. And they're there for our betterment, to uplift us, and to help answer the questions that we may have about spiritual life. So we should never think that the opportunity to get our doubts dispelled, to ask questions, and to get our questions answered, that there's never the opportunity to do that, because there's always the opportunity. And we see from the basic, at a basic level, our most read scriptures are based on that premise of questions and answers. Srila Prabhupada has the book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. A lot of our classes that are given, Bhagavatam classes, temple classes, Sunday feast classes, most of the time at the end, the speaker will ask, are there any questions? In order to give the audience an opportunity to, if they have any doubts or confusions, to be able to have that answered. Because really we want to bring people out of the realm of confusion, so that they have some clarity so that they can serve better and surrender more. As long as there's confusion in one's life with regards to who is Krishna, what am I really meant to do, the process of surrendering in devotional service, as long as there's doubts with regards to that, it's very hard for the intelligence to make the step and give one's life in Krishna's service. There'll always be barriers and obstacles, but to remove those doubts, that is the role of the spiritual master. Having a spiritual master isn't just to be fashionable, and Srila Prabhupada gives mention to that. Let's see here. He says, there's no necessity of approaching a spiritual master unless one is in need of solving the problems of life. So sometimes one is given a family spiritual master. And people say, okay, I have my guru, my family guru. This is common from, some people that were brought up in India, in that culture, to have had to have a family guru. Other times you'll see even within the international society, or you'll see other yoga groups, people take on a spiritual master because maybe they're inspired to get a new name, or they feel that this is a sign of organizational advancement. Okay, I've been around for some time. I guess I should take a spiritual master and give me a new name, so I'm no longer Dr. Bob. You know, you know, you know, you know, you know, and then now all of a sudden, Braj Vilas, so now all of a sudden I feel like I'm more important. But these aren't the reasons to approach a spiritual master. It should be done in order to awaken one to spiritual knowledge, and one should have the problems of life, the questions of the problems of life solved. Not only are the Bhagavatam and Srimad Bhagavad Gita are scriptures that teach us of questions and answers, it also teaches us the proper way to ask questions and receive the answers. So in the Bhagavad Gita, we have the verse in the 4th chapter, Tadvidi pranipratena pariprashena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshana. That when Krishna says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So there it is, Krishna instructing Arjuna. Inquire in a submissive way, not in a challenging way. And we find out here in this verse with Maharaj Parikshit. He came with folded hands, and he came in a very gentle, submissive manner, not in a challenging way. And this is the etiquette. There was a lecture that I was listening to that stuck out in my mind. And I listened to these from a very early age, like when I was just started becoming a devotee. I was listening to different lectures from different gurus, and His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, there was a question posed before him, and the question went something like this, and it's always stuck in my mind. The person kind of made a challenge, and he says, if what you say is true, if what you're saying is true, and then he went on to ask the question. And right away, Maharaj, he corrected him, and he says, that is no way to ask a question. And he says, do you think I'm up here just speculating? If what I'm saying is true, he says, you're questioning whether with what I'm saying is, first of all, if you're starting off by saying, if what you're saying, this was a disciple of his who was asking the question, but it was done in more of a challenging way. And that struck me, and I thought, wow, I had not come to this verse in the Bhagavad Gita about submissive inquiry yet. And so this is the etiquette. If we want to receive spiritual knowledge, and really any knowledge in general, we have to open ourselves up first with the element of humility. Humility is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as one of the first items of knowledge. Admitting that we don't know. There's something that I don't know and I'm trying to get from you. So that should bring us first into the element of humility. So we don't say, well, if what you're saying is true. Even if you're thinking that in your head, you wouldn't insult a person by presenting it in that way. You'd say, I have a few questions I'd like to place before you. These I feel are stumbling blocks on my path to self-realization, and I don't quite understand them. It is perfectly fine to say, I do not understand, or this does not make sense to me. I've tried to understand it, but I haven't come to any proper conclusions. These are these are very proper. And we see even with Arjuna, he was in that same position. The living entity is in ignorance. We're in a state of confusion, trying to understand this material world and where we belong in it, and where Krishna consciousness and spiritual life fits in. But if we want the blessings of the Guru and of the devotees, the formula is given. Rendering service, ask in a kind and gentle way, not in a challenging way. The other thing is when one becomes very challenging, also, the mind also gets disturbed. It kind of it gets thrown into the mode of passion. Now it's a competition. Now it becomes a debate. Now you may not be able to receive the information because now you may feel, okay, well, I at least have to represent myself. This is not the pathway to receiving spiritual knowledge. One's heart has to be opened, and one has to submit. We see this within the examples of the Rupa Goswami when he went before Lord Chaitanya, and he went before and he put a straw between his teeth and he bowed down, and then he started asking questions. So to get to that point, I also realized that one has to accept the spiritual master. So before one accepts the spiritual master, there's a time period by which one should study the spiritual master, and the spiritual master should study the student to see if the student is ready for this level of discipline. One should study the spiritual master so that one can surrender with intelligence. When one comes before the guru and accepts the guru, the doubt shouldn't be there. So there should be a period of time where one actually says, okay, is this a person that I can submit myself to? Is this a person that I can serve? But when that bond becomes solidified at the process of initiation, one should be convinced that this is an individual who is connected with Krishna, and this soul I can serve and surrender to. Now, the role of the spiritual master is he's willing to stay and continue to answer your questions until you're fully convinced. In the 72nd verse of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, after explaining, Krishna tells Arjuna, he says, O conqueror of wealth, have you heard this with an attentive mind? And are your ignorance and illusions now dispelled? So he's asking Arjuna, are we good here? Have you understood? Or do you still have confusion? If you still have confusion, continue to ask your questions, because I want you to leave this conversation so that you can go out and act in the way that I have directed you to do so. And interestingly enough, he just doesn't want them to act, but he wants them to act with an understanding of conviction. He wants them to be in knowledge. So that is the need for asking relevant questions to the Guru. Now, I want to tell a pastime about Lord Chaitanya. This is the month of Gaur Purnima, and Lord Chaitanya, when he first appeared on this planet, up until through his teenage years, he didn't demonstrate that he was himself as a devotee of the Lord. He was Nimai Pandit. He was a Pandit. And he didn't always hang around with the devotees. He was a teacher of Sanskrit grammar. And the devotees, they liked him, even though Lord Chaitanya would tease them a lot and try to enter into debate and argument with them. But he was very excellent at debate and argument. Philosophy, he would discuss with people and defeat them. And Navadvip, where Mayapur is located, was a place of learning. And one day, there was one of the top, I guess, debaters and logicians of the time named Keshava Kashmiri. He was traveling all throughout India, and he was defeating people in debate and argument. And it was said that he had the goddess Saraswati, he received a benediction from her, that the goddess would always be present on his tongue, that she would be directing him. And in that way, he would never be defeated in battle of the mind. You see this with warriors. They would be very challenging one another, and then they would engage in fight. But in this case, you had these scholars. They would engage each other in debate and conquer each other. And then when they would conquer, that would basically be their domain. So he would travel around, and he would carry this scroll, and he would basically mark down everybody who he had defeated. And he came to Navadvip, and the people of Navadvip, this was like a university city. Tons of people would send their children there to be educated. And they didn't know what to do. In fact, they were a little bit fearful. And they thought, if we're defeated, all of a sudden, our reputation as this place of learning will take a hit, and it'll be stained. So what happened was, all the scholars of the village, they didn't know what to do. And they said, well, why don't we put Nimai Pandit up against this Keshava Kashmiri? And because, after all, he's a young boy. If this great scholar, Keshava Kashmiri, defeats this young boy, Nimai Pandit, so what's the big deal? We'll just say he beat up on a boy, How proud can he really get? I said, on the other hand, if Nimai Pandit somehow happens to defeat him, then all of a sudden, this will be the biggest blow to his reputation, and our Navadvip will be even more glorified. So Lord Chaitanya heard about this, Nimai Pandit, and he came up with a plan, because he saw that this Keshava Kashmiri, he also had the name Digvijay, which means one who conquers all directions, that he was coming with a lot of pride. And he understood that he had this God-given ability. But if one doesn't use their God-given ability in the service of Krishna, ultimately it will be taken away. In fact, before one falls, usually one becomes very, very prideful. The higher you fall, the higher you go, the farther it is to fall. So he understood when Keshava Kashmiri came riding into Navadvip. He came, there's like a marching band, introducing him, trumpets and bugles. He rode in on elephant. He had horses and, men following him, with food and, water, serving him. He had these, fancy clothing. And Lord Chaitanya, that night, he took his students down to the Ganga, and he sat around them. And again, he taught, Sanskrit grammar, mostly to younger people. And they were all sitting around him, and it was a full moon night. And that night, Keshava Kashmiri came and went to take his bath. And Lord Chaitanya, he arranged it in such a way, because he's the Supreme Lord, that he would be situated right at that place where Keshava Kashmiri came out. Keshava Kashmiri came, took his bath, and offered his obeisances to Mother Ganga. And he saw Nimai Pandit and his effulgence. And right away, something struck him. Even though he felt he knew everything and he was unconquerable, there was a little bit of a pause for a moment, like, who is this person? Is this a formidable opponent of mine? And he really felt that there may be something here. Lord Chaitanya immediately got up, and his students offered their respects to the guest of the town. And Lord Chaitanya said, "We have heard so much about you." He says, "Now we're standing at the bank of the Mother Ganga, who can purify anybody's sins, but not everybody can come in and bathe in Mother Ganga. So if you could compose poetry in glorification of Mother Ganga, that way, anybody who hears and recites this poetry, whether they're in her presence or not, they can become purified of their sins." So right away, Keshava Kashmiri started, he just started reciting verses one after another. They said it was like the wind. It was just flowing so smoothly out of his mouth, and he was going on, 10 verses, 20 verses, 40 verses, 100 verses. And he was just going on, going and going. And all of a sudden, all the students who were around, their jaws just started dropping, like, wow, as advertised. We can't believe it. We're in front of a legend. This is unbelievable. They were just mesmerized by his ability to compose poetry on the spot. They couldn't even remember it, but it just sounded so pretty. Afterwards, Lord Nimai Pandit, he says, that was tremendous. We thank you so much for doing that for our purification, and it was just so beautiful. Everybody started clapping. And then he said to him, he says, "Now, after you're done, I have a few questions for you." And he said, "You've made a couple errors in your poetry. I would like you to explain the faults." He says, "You can explain a few of the ornaments, but can you please now explain some of the faults?" So Keshava Kashmiri, being very proud, he immediately corrected Nimai Pandit and said, "My young boy, these are not, whatever you've thought you've heard, you've misheard, because I'm Keshava Kashmiri. I don't have any faults. Everything I say."
Yeah, I extend devotees step and humble obeisances, all glories to the Prabhupada. Somehow we lost our speaker. Let's see if he'll come back on.
He'll come back on because he just loves at a very suspense stage.
Yeah, very.
He'll come back on.
Yeah. And I like the way he's retelling the story. It's very, very, very nice. Very nice story. Okay. In the meantime, what to do?
We'll just, chat. We'll just chant. He'll come back on. I know he will. He got us hanging right now. What did Brett say?
He said, chat one. That's what I thought Mataji Prabhu left at too suspenseful of a moment. Oh, here we go. Okay.
He's here?
Yeah, he's coming on, yeah.
Oh, good.
Okay, I'm back. I apologize for that.
Drona, you just kept it in suspense. You gotta go. You gotta tell us.
Yeah.
So Lord Chaitanya, he says, well, he starts reciting the particular verse where he made an error. And he starts explaining it to him, how it's a fault. And Keshav Kashmiri, all of a sudden, his jaw drops. He says, how can you possibly remember? He picked, a random verse somewhere in the hundreds of verses that he recited in a very short amount of time. And he says, this particular word, its use in grammar is improper. And then there's another one where you use the same thing, but you used it at the wrong, it should have been another word before that. And he says, so please explain this to us. And all of a sudden, Keshava Kashmiri, he started to shake, and he started to, when a person, they start to kind of stumble. This sometimes happens when a person memorizes stuff, and then they're asked a question, or maybe they get tripped up somewhere. They can't pick up again because they haven't realized that they're just kind of memorizing. But all of a sudden, Keshava Kashmiri, he was on the ropes. He was feeling weak all of a sudden. And he thought, wow, I think I've met my match. And he doesn't understand what's happening. He says, this is just a little boy who teaches children, grammar. And I'm one of the best in the whole entire world. I've never been defeated. And I've faced bigger opponents than this person. And then the students started to laugh. And Lord Chaitanya said, no, please do not laugh. He says, he has to give, let's not be disrespectful here. He says, so please think about this. I know it's been a long day for you. You've come here and you've spoken for a long time already. You've given us this beautiful poetry. He said, so contemplate these things overnight and then come see me in the morning and we can discuss more and maybe you'll have a better answer for me. Keshava Kashmiri, he didn't know what happened. Later on that night, he went home and he prayed to Mother Saraswati and said to her, he says, have I offended you in some way? He says, you weren't there for me. And for some reason, I lost all the powers that I had all of a sudden just seemed to be drained from me. He said, what happened? And he was praying to her and he couldn't sleep. And finally he fell asleep and Mother Saraswati came in a dream and said, that person who you were just talking with, that is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He says, in front of him, I cannot speak. I'm his humble servant. Even Brahma and Lord Shiva fall at his feet. He says, so tomorrow you can go before him and you can tell him this, but you can't tell anybody else. But you should submit to him and surrender with folded hands. So Keshava Kashmiri, he went and he fell at the feet of Nimai Pandit the next day and asked and told him what he had received from the goddess Saraswati. Now Nimai Pandit was also very sensitive because he knew that if he had defeated in public Keshava Kashmiri, this could have actually contributed him to committing suicide. Because for a person of pride, the worst thing for them is dishonor. We find that in the Bhagavad Gita. When Krishna tells Arjuna, he says, for a person of honor, dishonor is worse than death. Some type of insult or to become infamous to a person who is well known for whether philosophical ability, scholastic ability, or physical strength and fighting. To be dishonored is worse than death. They rather die with honor than to live with dishonor. So he did it in seclusion. When he met and he challenged him with, around just a small group of his students. So Keshava Kashmiri had the ability to, have his pride checked. And Lord Chaitanya told him 3 things. He says, worship Krishna, be merciful to the living entities, and then also become free of your false pride. And this is Krishna correcting Keshava Kashmiri and checking the pride of Keshava Kashmiri. Now, neither of them were in the guru-disciple relationship, but Nimai Pandit took the role of establishing himself as the teacher and master of Keshava Kashmiri. But it required some strong intervention. Now, there's another instance that happened in Navadvip, and I just want to be aware of the circumstances of the personalities involved. So, around the same time, there was a great sadhu who visited Navadvip. And this sadhu came unannounced, very simple, in very simple dress of a sannyasi. And he came and he just sat on the front yard of a Dronacharya. And when people would walk by, they didn't know who this person was. And he didn't make a big deal. He just sat in meditation, chanting Krishna's names. When a Dronacharya saw him, he came and he talked to him. And Mukunda Ghosh, who was one of the great kirtan leaders of the time, began to sing bhajans. And this devotee all of a sudden started crying tears of ecstasy. And soon they were able to understand that this is actually a really devotee who has spontaneous love for Krishna. And they found out that his name was Ishwara Puri. And Ishwara Puri, he was a scholar in his own right. He composed a lot of beautiful poetry and spoke very wonderfully about Krishna. He was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri. In fact, he was one of the top disciples, well-known disciples of Madhavendra Puri, having served him, especially at the time when Madhavendra Puri was at the end of his life and he couldn't do very much physically. He would clean up after him and serve him and help him remember Krishna. And thus he was empowered with the message of Krishna and the mercy of his spiritual master and the Guru Parampara. But he appeared when he appeared, he was very humble. When when he met Nimai Pandit fell at his feet and asked to serve him. He brought him over, and Sachi Mata and his wife Lakshmi Priya, they would cook for Ishwara Puri. And Nimai Pandit would sit before him and ask him questions. And Ishwara Puri would respond. And one day, Ishwara Puri said, I hear you are excellent at editing and correcting, debate and logic. He says, I also compose poetry, and I've heard about what happened with Keshava Kashmiri. I would like it if you would find the faults in my poetry so that I can properly present it in a way that is pleasing to Krishna and the devotees. And right away, Nimai Pandit said, you are a pure devotee of Krishna. It would be an offense for me to even comment on what you have presented. I'm a mere, logician. I teach Sanskrit grammar. He says it would be improper for me to comment on this. Everything that you've put together is should be considered perfect. Some time went on. Again, Ishwara Puri approached him and said, I too make mistakes. I don't want you to think that what I've put together, what I've composed, is without any type of mistake. He says, so again, I ask you to please look and find some mistake. Because I'm looking with the goal of being able to present this in a way that is acceptable for everybody. So Lord Chaitanya said, okay, well, if you ask me to do this, so Nimai Pandit, he said, there are a few things that I noticed. You use this one particular word, but there's a better word for it that would be more descriptive and more direct. So he suggested this to use a particular word instead of another word that he had used. And Ishwara Puri said, okay, thank you. And he wrote it down. And the next day, Ishwara Puri came to him and he says, I've been thinking about this, what you've said. But as you presented it before me, I, realized that actually what you suggested was not the correct word. What I had actually was the correct word. And you should, I'm going to keep it the way it was. And he explained to Nimai Pandit the exact reason why it was correct. And Lord Chaitanya became overwhelmed with joy, because in this particular case, he was being, Nimai Pandit was being corrected by a pure devotee of the Lord. So the difference here between these two circumstances of Ishwara Puri, who was a devotee, who was very humble and submissive, always spoke about Krishna, didn't consider himself to be beyond fault, and asked Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to please help him. And then you have the example of Keshava Kashmiri, who was full of pride, who felt that he was undefeatable, who felt that he was without fault. And we see how Nimai Pandit interacted with both of these and handled them in two completely different ways. Now, Nimai Pandit later on took initiation from this Ishwara Puri, considering him to be, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, considering him to be worthy of taking initiation from this soul coming, who is the intimate servant of Madhavendra Puri, who is so knowledgeable in the scriptures of Krishna, who is such a humble soul. He surrendered his life to. Later on, and I'll stop with this, when Lord Chaitanya was asked in the presence of Prakashananda Saraswati, who was the leading Mayavadi at the time, why don't you study Vedanta? Why don't you join us, in meditation and discussing, the Vedas? Lord Chaitanya says, my spiritual master, Ishwara Puri, he considered me to be a great fool and unqualified to study Vedanta, and said that in this age of Kali, the only thing that the mind can actually absorb and process is the chanting of Krishna's holy names. And he chanted the verse, Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam, kalona stevanam, 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 gatiranyata. In this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means for deliverance is chanting the Lord's holy names, chanting the Lord's holy names, chanting the Lord's holy names. And in that purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about that when one goes before the spiritual master, one should never think of oneself to be knowledgeable. One should always present oneself to be a fool. One should come before the spiritual master, and even if they may have some knowledge based on previous understanding, one should not try to flaunt this before the spiritual master, but should always present oneself as a servant, and always present oneself as wanting to learn and not more than what the spiritual master has instructed one to do. So I'll stop here. These are some of the thoughts in relationship to this verse about humble submission and how Lord Chaitanya received and dealt with different people based upon their qualification with regards to correcting them, submitting to them, and presenting himself as a disciple. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, glory to Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhu, very much for a very nice lecture about disciple and spiritual master, and an understanding of how disciple relates to the spiritual master in order to get blessings from the spiritual master, and also instructions from the spiritual master, what to do and what not to do. In other words, don't ask in a challenging mood. And then the stories that happened in Navadvip, one with Digvijay Keshava Kashmiri, and then the other one with Ishwar Puri, who later on became the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya. Very, very, very nice, instructive lecture on things to do and things not to do, so we have a better understanding of who the spiritual master is. So the word is, if you want to ask a question, share, take away, or connect us with a realization that you have, please unmute yourself and please do so. We have nice, that many people coming this morning, which is a wonderful tribute in itself, wanting to hear. Hearing is so good. So please unmute yourself. Hare Krishna. Okay, go ahead.
Krishna, Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances of the Prabhupada. First of all, Dronacharya, beautiful class. And I don't know if anyone has told you this, but you're a very good storyteller. You are a very good storyteller. When when you lost the Zoom, we were hanging on a thin thread for the suspense. We couldn't wait for it to come back. It's like we've heard the past time, but when you said it, it was beautiful.
All glories to Gurudev and Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you so much. Really wonderful class. Actually, as you were speaking about guru-disciple relationship, I was thinking about Kadamba Kanana Swami, when he was leaving his body, when you was in the beginning of your class, you're speaking about, Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami and Srila Vyasadeva, the guru and the disciple being present. Somehow my mind went to Kadamba Kanana Swami when when he was leaving his body, his guru was by his side, Jayadvaita Swami, until his very last breath. And I was thinking, wow, it's such a what you call it, such a blessed opportunity to have the spiritual master by your side till our last breath. I mean, what better, chances of not going back to God? You know what I mean? It's just so beautiful. And another point you made, which I did not hear that before, Donna. So thank you for bringing it up. I think you were reading from Prabhupada. He says that if we don't need answers to our problems, then we don't need a guru. Is that what he said, Prabhu?
Yeah, and today that's the
It's in the purport.
for today's verse, and in the purport to today's verse.
That is powerful. I mean, to me, it's so powerful that, then I'm starting to think, is that why sometimes we come across situations where people generally have a challenge to surrender to a guru because they don't feel like they have problems?
Yeah, or they don't have faith. That could be one reason. Another could be is they don't have they haven't really taken on the mood of a disciple. You know, when one takes discipleship is a big step. There's there's surrender there. I mean, we can't say it any other way. I mean, it requires surrender. Disciple means discipline. One is to be disciplined and directed and instructed by a higher authority in the spiritual master. So one has to be ready for that. So sometimes the allure and kind of the romanticism of an initiation, getting beads and, having everybody around clapping, and, you may see the ceremony and the fire and, okay, I want that. I want to be part of that. I want a new name. I don't like my name. I want a spiritual name. We get caught up in the allure of that. But these are external in the sense they're Krishna conscious and external. I mean, it's not that it's external in a bad way, but these things are not necessarily what's changing inside of you, within the heart. So that has to take place, and therefore one should be. One doesn't have to. Initiation is just the beginning stages, but one should at least have this conviction that I'm willing to be a disciple. Because if you're not willing to be a disciple, you'll fall away. That's what will happen. You'll think, okay, well, I don't need to ask these questions. I'll figure it out on my own. Or, Guru won't really understand. I got my own life to live. No one really understands me. I got to take care of myself. And you'll just live a life of a regular, we say a karmi or karma kandi, or you're just a regular person. But when we look at the life of Srila Prabhupada and how he became a disciple and what he did in front of his spiritual master, he would ask his spiritual master, he'd say, I realize I'm a householder. Most of your disciples are sannyasis. I wish I could render more service, but due to my circumstances, I'm very limited in what I can do. But I think of you all the time. And please, if there's any service I can render to you, please let me know. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, the same thing he told him in 1936. He told him in 1922 when he first met him. If you go to the West, write books, and print books, and preach in the West. Preach Krishna consciousness in the West. And there's another time when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he marks Srila Prabhupada. He says, I know this boy, he's going to be good because he likes to listen. He likes to attend my classes and listen very attentively. And he recognized that quality in Srila Prabhupada. So we have to understand this through example. And the example's there in Srila Prabhupada. There's the example there within our acharyas, and the example is there within Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, Maharaj Parikshit, and so many other wonderful, great devotees and sages in the Srimad Bhagavatam. That's the example we should follow in our own lives. We should become a disciple in their footsteps.
Thank you very much for a very in-depth answer to this. It's very, very important that you mentioned the connection between guru and disciple. And yeah, Srila Prabhupada says that if you don't want to understand the problems of life, then you don't need to go to the spiritual master then. And of course, the inquiry has to be done in a submissive way also. You shouldn't ever challenge the spiritual master. And this is not just there, if I could just add this, it's not there just as a point to just have devotees respect the spiritual master. Spiritual master should be respected, but that statement is a very heavy statement. If you challenge the spiritual master, chances are very high your devotional life will go down. And I've seen it happen. We've seen it happen. So That's not just a statement, it's a warning. It's a warning because the Guru is not an ordinary person. A representative of Krishna cannot be an ordinary person. And when you hang around gurus, and sometimes when you talk to them, the things they're able to say that you haven't mentioned, but they talk about you, it will surprise you. Then you realize this is not an ordinary person. Not an ordinary person. So, knowing that, I'm always ready. Personally, I'm always ready to hear whatever they'll say and however they put it. You just submissively take all of that because Krishna speaks through them. That's a fact. And if you offend them, you're offending Krishna, and the devotion life's not going to last. So, Guru is very helpful to us, but how we relate to Guru is even more important, and it should remain important to us. And that is in a submissive way. So, thank you for bringing it up, Hare Krishna. Any other? We passed the hour, about 9:15 now. If anyone has some last-minute questions or inspired to share some takeaway from this, please unmute yourself now. Okay, so I don't see anybody wanting to ask questions now. Thank all of you for coming. The more people that come, the more wonderful it is. So that means we have important information to now spread to other people. Learn from it and spread to other people also. So everybody can grow. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sunibhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Siropada ki jai. Thank you,
Hare
everybody.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, dear Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Rona.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.